This is The Drive with Trey Radel on 92.5 Fox News.
Trey Radel, your host of The Drive. Joining us now, a special guest that has been a friend for a long time, and he's now about to be a published author. That said, let me read a review on his book. As governments around the world seek to exert tyrannical control over currency, Quoz, that's the name of the book, serves as a cautionary tale for what lies ahead. You've been warned. That quote from a guy by the name of Trey Radel, a real douche. That is me, and my friend is Mel Madison. Mel, welcome to the show. Dude, congratulations.
Thank you, Trey, and thank you for that wonderful quote. I appreciate it.
So let me give everybody a little bit of perspective here. Mel, I've got all this bio stuff on what Mel's done, where he's worked. Let me just intro Mel like this. Mel is I went to college with Mel. When I moved to Chicago, he was one of my very, very first friends. That means we've known each other for decades now. Mel and I have traveled parts of the world together. We've been in some very rough parts of the world, in Latin America, Sicily, Italy, and Mel's a longtime friend, and he is hands down the smartest person I've ever met. Like I don't throw that out there lightly. Mel, at any endeavor that he's taken on academically, including when we were at school, is the top of the class. Mel, then, to show you a little bit about Mel, he graduates and then he goes and camps in the Appalachian Mountains for a year. He goes and lives in Latin America, Guatemala for a year. He does all of this while interspersing it with top jobs in the financial arena for years. Goes to Duke, takes what is the test that you take to go to grad school?
The GMAT.
The GMAT, and you score in the top 1 percentile in the nation, and is getting recruited by universities, and he's like, oh, I guess I'll just go to Duke. And so it's a little bit of insight into Mel's, at times, crazy life, crazy personality, all of it very lovable, intense, and intelligent as anyone could ever imagine. Now, Mel, I've set you up here in a big way of telling people about you personally and what a compelling human being you are. It's why I love you, dude. We've known each other for 30 years. You've now written a book that talks about a lot of the themes that we take on in this show. And that includes central bank digital currency, the World Economic Forum. And I'm going to toss to you with this. Mel Madison has I'd say, coined a fantastic phrase that everyone needs to know, and that is the deep economic state. So, Mel, without any further ado, I want to go right to that. We've heard of the deep state. We've watched it in action in politics. Tell me, in your world and all of the things that you've done in the financial industry, what is the deep economic state and what do they exert over our economy?
All right. Well, great. First, Trey, thank you for that intro.
Sure.
And second, although it was amazing, I would also just add for your listeners that over 20 years, I've spent working on the inside of finance. And I've spent time as the CEO of 3 different FINRA SEC registered broker-dealers. I've seen the way all the money moves. I've seen all the inside dirty tricks. And what I wanted to bring to Quoz was not only a great thriller, but something that, as you mentioned, explores what I call the deep economic state. And what I mean by that is we all know it's part of a bigger milieu, a bigger spider's web. But the economic state, really, it focuses around the shadowy international organizations that control the world's economy. I'm talking about things like the IMF. I'm talking about the World Bank. I'm talking about central banks writ large. I'm talking specifically about a little-known bank, but a very important one called the Bank for International Settlements, based in Basel, Switzerland, which is the central bank for central banks. It's like a secretive central bankers UN. And really, these organizations have been fostering, creating, and implementing, I might add, globalist policies for decades. Their biggest success today probably is the euro, the single currency, and they're working now towards even bigger successes. And I think they've got their eyes on something, a global central bank digital currency.
That is fascinating, the creation of the euro. And in fact, to draw on our own experience, Mel, we both lived in Italy together when there was the lira. There was, every country had its own currency, and here we are now with the euro. And we've seen, by the way, how certain countries have been able to exert political control over others in Western Europe. On the line with us right now is Mel Madison. Mel, as I've shared with you, is a dear friend of mine, and he is the author of the book called Quoz. We'll talk a little bit more about the book. It's a financial thriller, and it's on Amazon now, and you could pre-order it. Quoz is Quoz. Let me ask you real quick about that. Quoz, what is the name of this book here, and why?
Sure. So Quoz is short for quantum Oz. So the book takes place in the near future, where global financial markets are controlled through this deep state via AI and quantum computing. And Quoz is like a name in the book where they reference, where the computer's held. But it also even has a second meaning. It's a little bit of an homage to Frank Baum, who is the author of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. And a lot of people don't know or aren't aware that around the time that book was written, there was a lot of monetary mayhem and mischief going on around silver and the gold standard and different things. And a lot of what Frank Baum did in The Wizard of Oz was he created an allegory where the yellow brick road was the gold standard. Dorothy did not wear ruby slippers in the book. She wore silver shoes.
Wow.
And the Emerald City was really the fraudulent greenback or greenback dollar, basically.
Oh, by the way, if you are just doing, I'm seeing Wizard of Oz now in a completely different light. And what Mel is giving us insight to is the symbolism of so many different things from, as he's just laid out the book, in the financial industry, the references within that, the yellow brick road, gold, silver shoes because she didn't wear ruby, and Emerald City. Is Emerald City a reference to the dollar?
It is to the dollar,
wow.
and it's a fraud backed by nothing.
Oh, God. Here we go. So, and again, Mel is the author of the book Quoz. It's a financial thriller that dives into this, the deep economic state. Look, I can't help myself, but I want to follow that up. The Emerald City then, Emerald City now, the dollar now, and how it's backed by what we're all taught in school, the confidence of America, not the gold standard. I want to stick on that a little bit, and then I do want to get to central bank digital currencies, which a lot of people are interested in, especially in this audience. But can you give your take on the dollar today, the way that the Fed has assisted in the wild swings of its value and more?
Mm-hmm. Sure. The big thing with the dollar is we're in the midst of a massive experiment. So I'm sure most of your listeners are aware that it was the early 70s when Nixon completely took us off of the gold standard. And up until that point, there was something that backed the dollar. And for a while, by using, let's say, putting the debt out there and making the debt be bought by somebody, whether that's a bank or a foreign government, there were certain controls. But a genie was really released from the bottle after the great financial crisis in 08 and 09, where the Federal Reserve started doing massive, what they call quantitative easing, where they just buy the U.S. debt. And that really is just creating money, increasing the money supply without any commensurate rise in goods and services. And when you increase the money supply without a rise in goods and services, you get inflation. And what we saw in the last couple of years was just what I think is a taste of what is coming down the road given the amount of fiscal spending that has already been spent. And by that, I'm talking mostly about entitlements. I'm talking about the Social Security Trust Fund running dry in a matter of 7 or 8 years. I'm talking about Medicare. I'm talking about the increase in stimulus and the infrastructure plans and all of this, that what we're heading towards could be, it doesn't have to be, but we could be heading to the mother of all crashes, and that would be the crash of the dollar.
Okay, so then this is heavy stuff. And when you talk about that, like, let me attempt to build some bridges here between quantitative easing and what we're looking at with mandatory spending. Quantitative easing, it's interesting how it's not even branded or talked about anymore. And it was at one point and it was called QE1. And then there was QE2, as in the letters Q and E, and it was a fancy branding of, oh, look at this, we're just going to, we're going to do this. We're doing quantitative easing. There was one and there's two, but the reality, as I'm understanding right now, is that this is just constant. We have been quantitative easing, it seems, consistently for the last several years, and a component of that is spending on, we have our mandatory spending, which is never, ever dealt with by Republicans or Democrats, which is the mandatory spending on Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, which is infinitely rising, taking up about 60% of our budget today. So what you're saying is when we combine all of these, the quantitative easing, the mandatory spending that has no fix in sight, that's where you get to, that's where you have arrived at, we could have a potential serious problem on our hands. Is that correct?
Yes, we're getting ourselves between a rock and a hard place. And just because I know your listeners are smart and they might be saying to themselves, but Mel, quantitative easing isn't going on right now. And to some extent, they're right. So the Fed did begin letting the quantitative easing come to an end and their balance sheet go down a little bit. But by a little bit, I mean like their entire balance sheet, meaning the amount of money the Federal Reserve held or created, was around $800 billion before the financial crisis. By the time last year started, it was up to $9 trillion. So they've let a few $100 billion roll off of that balance sheet. But here's the canary in the coal mine. Back in May, when Silicon Valley Bank failed, all of a sudden that balance sheet started expanding again. Okay, all of a sudden quantitative easing was back. So what that tells you is that the first scent of trouble, the first time there's a real recession coming, the first time the economy is really in danger, once they've used this tool, once they've gotten a taste of quantitative easing, they're going to come back to it. And so we might be in a period of a pause now. 2024 might even be a year, a respite from inflation gone wild. But the long-term horizon, stock charts don't go straight up. They go up, they go down. And the Fed's balance sheet goes up, goes down. But the long-term trajectory is for them to continue to expand it, because there's only two choices. Either one, they buy bonds, or two, the government's going to have to issue so much debt that they're going to be spitting out 10-year bonds that are going to be selling in the marketplace at 10% interest. And that type of interest expense, the United States taxpayer can't afford. And so there's only going to be one solution. It's for the Federal Reserve to create money to buy those bonds, to keep interest rates at a level that the taxpayer can afford. And what that inevitably is going to do is it's going to lead to more inflation down the road.
On the line with us right now, Mel Madison, laying out, and I love it, nerding out with us as we often do, especially in this hour, talking about quantitative easing, mandatory spending, where we're at, how we could be in a period of long-term inflation. Mel is the author of a book called Quoz. This is a financial thriller which gets into the deep economic state, and he lays it out in a beautifully told story. And this is available now on Amazon. You just go to Amazon.com, and Quoz is Quoz. And Mel Madison on the line with us right now is the author. Mel, another area that I'd like to discuss with you, for you to lay out to us, are these central bank digital currencies. And I want to bring it local here to the state of Florida. Here in Florida, Governor DeSantis and our Republican legislators got behind this legislation to protect against these central bank digital currencies and the way that the government could potentially use them, monitor them, leverage them. Can you first of all just explain a little bit about central bank digital currencies, or what are often called CBDCs? Explain them to us and how you see them unfolding in the future.
Sure. So central bank digital currencies, I like to think of them basically, they're digital dollars. I like to think of them as marked bills on steroids. So we've all seen movies where law enforcement, the cops, they want to catch a criminal. They use marked bills or consecutive serial numbers, and they do that so they can track everywhere that money goes. And a central bank digital currency is a digital version of a marked bill, but it's on steroids, because not only can they track where every dollar goes and how it's spent, but they can turn that bill on. They can turn that bill off if they don't like you, like Canada froze trucker bank accounts when they protested. They can do behavioral controls, so they can put, let's say, Trey, you've got a fossil fuel allowance this month of $200 and you've spent it, so no more gasoline for you. So what this is it's a digital version of money controlled by the government that can have all of what the is called in the technical world programmability. It has money with programmability. And this is really why a lot of people, including Governor DeSantis, have taken measures to stop this from becoming so widespread that by the time it gets in place, there's nothing we can do about it.
And we've heard, we've run sound bites of people at the World Economic Forum and others who say that this is great, that they have very openly talked about that programmability and even how they can implement morality control. And you hear these sound bites of people who are like, yeah, this would be great. You know, if we don't want people drinking alcohol, we can simply shut that off. And you will not be able to purchase things at a liquor store with that money. It gets very scary how they can exert control with this. Where do things stand now? And how do you put a stop to this type of, when you've got people who get together in Davos and very openly talk about these kind of things of, this is great, we can have control over people. How do you think the American people, anyone listening right now, could take a stand to something like this? Because it's in development. How do you stop it? How do you take a stand against it?
Yeah. Well, first, just really quick about where we're at now is these things are in development. In some countries, they've been put into place. These are smaller countries like the Bahamas, Jamaica, Nigeria. But the largest economy, China, or the largest economy to actually bring this to the public with a pilot program is China. The European Union has done something which I think is really informative for where this is going. So they released a white paper a few years ago, and they talked openly in the white paper about all the things that I'm talking about tracking, about social controls. It was met with such a response of people saying hell no to it that they released a white paper a little bit later, and they talk about more how they're going to do these things for privacy, and it's going to go through banks, and none of this Orwellian stuff is actually going to happen. And they keep toning it down and toning it down. Here's what they're doing. They're recognizing that the people are catching on, and so they're coming out with all these mechanisms to say that people like me are just crazy tinfoil guys, and don't listen to them. There's nothing to see here. Just like the Wizard of Oz. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, right? I mean, it's literally like you could take a quote from the movie.
Yep.
And they're saying, pay no attention here. It's just a digital dollar. It's harmless. We're never going to do any of these things. It's like quantitative easing. Once these genies get out of the bottle, they're not going back in. Now, as far as your second question, which is, what can people do? There are things that we can do as individuals. There's things we can do as businesses. We can obviously, use cash again, which a lot of people haven't used in years. These things take a little bit of sacrifice. Another thing that people can do is just, look for alternatives that have the benefits of CBDCs, but not the government control. So if you're into technology, I'm not a technophobe, you have things like privately issued stable coins that can do the same thing as a CBDC. They can be transferred instantaneously, 24/7, 365, low fees or no fees. All of these things are possible without the government needing to do it, right? And that's what being a conservative is all about. If we don't need the government to do something for us, we don't want the government to do something for us, because they have a tendency to really know how to screw things up. So what I'm saying is that if we together, work and use systems that don't use the CBDCs, we can operate in the world without it. What I'm afraid of and what I'm concerned about is that there's a lot of people that really, really want this to happen, and that there's going to be ways that they're going to incentivize people so that it makes it very difficult not to do. Let's say the next time there's stimulus checks that go around and you don't get your check unless you have a universal digital ID,
yep.
and you don't have a CBDC wallet, or all of these things. You get a favorable interest rate on your mortgage. There's all kinds of ways that I feel the system will work to incentivize us. And I think a lot of lawmakers are getting aware of this. They're putting measures in place to stop it. But really, it's on a path, and I think we're heading there. And hopefully we can just minimize it and people can educate themselves so they don't get trapped by it.
The book is Quoz, Quoz. The author is Mel Madison. And Mel, this has been one hell of a conversation. It's first of all, always great to hear your voice. Mel and I have a ritual. We call each other every Christmas Eve day. And we've done that. This year was what, 24 years?
24 years.
24 years.
2000 was the first year.
The year 2000, we called each other. Man, there are so many stories that I absolutely, even an X-rated adult podcast couldn't share with you of what Mel and I have done and been through, and that involves some tequila and the country of Mexico and more. Mel, congrats on this. The book is Quoz, and you can pre-order it right now on Amazon, and it will be delivered to you by January 30, right? That's the date, Mel?
Jan 30, that's right.
January 30th. And we'll have you on again before or after. I'd love to have you on again as some of these developments take place, as politics gets heated up as well in this country. A huge thank you to you, Mel Madison. Where can people find you on social media? Best place? You got a website?
Best site is go to melmadison.com, melmadison.com.
All right. Again, melmadison.com, and you can find his book, Quoz, on Amazon. You can pre-order it right now. Mel, thank you. I'm Trey Radel. This is The Drive. We'll be right back.